Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Crime Family. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the Karissa Boudreau case. And this actually is a case that happened in our home province of Nova Scotia. So shout out to Nova Scotia. But it happened back in the winter of 2008, and it involves the disappearance and murder of 12-year-old Karissa Boudreau. And so we're going to be taking you through that, the investigation, as well as a undercover operation that was kind of controversial that led to the truth. So with all that being said, let's get started. All right. So, as I said in the intro, this case takes place in Nova Scotia in Bridgewater, which is about 90 minutes southwest of Halifax. Do either of you know a little bit about this case, or do you remember maybe when it was, in the news?
I remember hearing it in the news, and it was like the first time it was like a close to home case. And yeah, I remember being just a weird feeling that murder can happen here.
Yeah, that's true, though. I actually feel like the first case that I was aware of that happened in Nova Scotia, because it happened in 2008, so I would have been like 14, 15. So before then, you don't really hear about stuff like that happening in Nova Scotia, but obviously it does. Especially Bridgewater, which is quite a small town. It's not like it's Halifax or something.
Yeah, I remember I was in my first year of college when I first heard. Sorry, no, it was my second year of college. Sorry, when I heard about the case, and it was just really shocking to hear something so close to home. And since then, I've read or watched documentaries on it and read articles about it. So I'm pretty familiar with it, but I'm sure there's stuff from the case that I never did watch or read about. So I'm interested to hear it.
Yeah, I feel like for us, it's probably pretty well known, or at least, when you say the name, everyone kind of knows who you're talking about, but maybe outside of Nova Scotia, people aren't as familiar with it. And I know I had a friend in university who actually went to the same school in junior high as Karissa, so we actually had some discussions about that. So anyway, like I said, this case does take place in January of 2008. Around 8:30 p.m. on January 27th, Penny Boudreau reported to the police that her 12-year-old daughter Karissa was missing. Penny says that she and Karissa were driving around in her car and they were having a little bit of an argument prior, and then Penny says that she went into Sobeys. And for those of you who don't know, Sobeys is like a grocery store chain if you're outside of Canada. But Penny says she went into Sobeys, bought a few items, and then when she came out, Karissa was gone. And this is when she reported her missing. And everyone was initially concerned because, it was the middle of winter and Karissa was not dressed very warmly for the winter weather. She had sandals on, she had just a hoodie. And there was a lot of snow in the forecast, and it was supposed to be getting really, really cold the next couple of days. So that was initially what everyone's concern was that she was missing. And, if she's gone overnight or into the next day, it's going to be, not good. Like I said, Penny says that she was having a heart-to-heart conversation with Karissa in the car prior, and they were talking about just typical teenager things. She said it was nothing of note, just, your run-of-the-mill angsty teenager who was having a fight with her mother. So the surveillance video of the Sobeys on that day actually does show Penny going into Sobeys, and like she said, she went in while Karissa waited in the car. And on January 29th, this is when they had their first press conference. And in the press conference, Penny is pleading to Karissa or to anyone who knows anything to please for her to come home or for someone to come forward with info about where Karissa is. And during this press conference, Penny totally breaks down, as you would expect. So the same day that they have that first press conference, the police do receive a phone call from some citizens who say that they had spotted something that looked like footwear along the side of William Hebb Road, which is like a secluded road just outside of Bridgewater. It's part of the highway. They saw like some footwear in the embankment. So they call the police, and the police do come to the scene, and they seize the footwear. It ends up being a pink Croc. So they seize it and they bring it in for DNA testing, and the DNA test results do prove that it is belonging to Karissa Boudreau. So this is a huge break in the case. They know that somewhere she had lost her footwear somewhere along this road here, but there's only one Croc, not the other. They also have a second press conference on February 1st because she still has not returned home, and the entire community is worried because Bridgewater is a town of about 8,000 people, so it's pretty small, and it's kind of one of those communities where a lot of people know each other, and so they were having like candlelight vigils and stuff, and they're kind of rallying together to try to support Penny and her family and try to get any information they can to bring Karissa home. And on February 9th, which was, just about 2 weeks after she went missing, some passersby, it was a little boy and his mother, and the little boy says that he saw some toes sticking out of the snow. So he called his mother over to check out what he saw, and the mother immediately called the police, and the police come to the scene, and they discover a body, which is eventually identified to be 12-year-old Karissa. A couple of days later, police release the identity of the body, and they're keeping everything very close to the vest. They're not really saying the detailed information about what evidence they have, but interviews after the fact do say that police at this time suspected that Karissa knew her killer and that it was not just a random killing. Ligature marks were found around her neck to suggest that the manner of death was strangulation. And again, that was something that was kept quiet as well from the general public. So a lot of the information that I'm going to be talking about, like about the discovery of the body and the evidence that they have, so a lot of this was not information that they were releasing at the time because they were keeping a lot of things as holdback evidence, which is just means that they were keeping everything very quiet, and they were trying to keep information that only the killer would know. So that case, if somebody did say something that wasn't general knowledge, it might lead them to be more suspicious. It's kind of easier to find someone who might be involved in it if they know something that's not just generally out there. So a lot of this information that I'm going to be explaining is stuff that came out after the fact. The police surmise that the body was placed there shortly after her death, and the body was found, or she was placed there before rigor mortis was set in, and there was no evidence to suggest that she had struggled to climb up the embankment from the river or anything. So this was indicating that the body had been dumped there, because she was found in kind of like an embankment off this secluded part of the highway, and there was like a river below it. So they thought maybe she had fallen into the river and then she had tried to climb up or something, but there was no evidence that really backed that up. So they said that the body had been dumped over the embankment. So that was on February 9th. And on February 11th, the neighbors who lived next door to Penny Boudreau, Karissa's mother, who was living with her boyfriend Vernon McCumber at the time, the neighbors said that they heard a verbal altercation between the couple. And this was just a couple days after Karissa's body was found, and they were arguing and things were being thrown around the apartment. And they did hear Vernon say things like, "How could you do this?" And the neighbors did initially report this to the police. Now, just a little bit of history about like the family dynamic. So Chris's parents had separated prior to all of this. So Penny was dating Vernon McCumber, which was her new-ish boyfriend. And in some journal entries that they had found that were done by Karissa before her death, she wrote things like, "I'm sad because," and she has a list. Number 1, "I have to go to school tomorrow." Number 2, "I miss Shane and Tracy." Number 3, "I have to go to bed at 9:30 instead of 11. Number 4, "I live in an apartment." Number 5, "There's no room for my stuff." Number 6, "I feel crowded." Number 7, "End of story. My life sucks until we live in a house," by Karissa. And then in another one, they found one that said, "I'm mad because," number 1, "Mom is engaged to Vernon." Number 2, "Mom made me move here." Number 3, "Mom broke up with Shane." Number 4, "I want a bigger room." Number 5, "I don't like Vernon living with us." And number 6, "The end of my life is ruined." This is by Karissa. And according to Vernon, in interviews after all of this had happened, he said that Penny and Karissa had been fighting for a long time. It was a common occurrence. They would get into, physical altercations and just screaming matches all the time. Karissa was a 12-year-old girl and probably typical of many teenagers, but he just noticed that they were fighting a lot. And Karissa was just unhappy with her current living situation. Clearly by that, she didn't like how small their apartment was, and she wanted to go live with her dad. She didn't want to be there with Penny and Vernon, so she did not like Vernon for whatever reason. I don't really know any of the details regarding that, but clearly by the stuff that she's writing, she does not like him at all. So going back to the investigation, and like I said, there were neighbors in their apartment complex who said that they heard the verbal altercation between Penny and Vernon, and this was very alarming to them. And it was a couple of days later, on February 14th, Penny and Vernon were asked to come to police headquarters, and later that day, after they were interviewed, they were later arrested and charged in Karissa's murder. Again, the police were being very tight-lipped about specific evidence that they had that led them to arrest them and charge them, but they were both charged at this time. On February 25th, a local resident calls police and says that he had found a pink sandal. He found it in a garbage can outside of a local swimming pool. So the police go, of course, and they do find this sandal, which ended up being a croc. They find a pink croc, a black hoodie, and a black vest in the garbage can. And the resident says that he had checked the month previously in the garbage there, and it was not there. He was just looking for extra bottles and stuff. He was collecting the bottles. So he would frequently go to this swimming pool to collect the cans and stuff from this garbage can. So he was there a lot. So the police do go, they find all of these clothing items in the garbage, and the pink croc that they found was the same size and the same color as the one that was left behind at the location that the body was found. Again, like I said, there was the pink croc that was left behind at the beside the highway next to the embankment where Karissa's body was found. So this suggested to them that they were both connected, and these items that were in the garbage can were dumped there after the killing. Again, this was part of the holdback evidence from the police, and none of this information was public at the time that this was happening. So I actually found the agreed statement of facts that was read at the court proceedings later on in the case, but the agreed statement of facts does say that the couple they had moved to Halifax in April of 2008, so obviously they were released. So they, like I said, they were arrested and charged, but at some point before April 1st, they were released from police custody. I'm not really sure why. I couldn't get the specifics of that, but they moved from Bridgewater to Halifax on April 1st of 2008. But during the couple's jail time, while they were arrested, there were some undercover police officers that started to conduct a covert investigation, and this involved them posing as members of a crime syndicate, and they started befriending Vernon in his prison cell. And this covert operation was called Operation Mr. Big. That was their code name for it. And after they're getting a rapport with him going and they're befriending him, he eventually does say to them that he had no part in Karissa's death, but thought that Penny did. And he said that he was staying in a relationship with her in order to keep her close and to ensure that she didn't try to implicate him in the murder as well. So he was afraid that if he were to break things off with her, she might, out of revenge or out of spite, she might try to say that he was involved in a murder as well. The things that he was saying led the police to really believe that Penny was the one who had murdered Karissa. So on May 3rd of 2008, the undercover police officers convinced Vernon that they had this whole story concocted, and they said that for the work that they were doing, they needed a female to work for them for this specific job. And they asked him to approach Penny about doing this work for them. And this was all in an attempt for them to get vital information from Penny about what she knew about Karissa's murder or disappearance, if she knew anything. So this is kind of what led them to Penny. Did you guys have any thoughts so far about this series of events?
The first thing that stands out to me as kind of a red flag is how Karissa was writing that she didn't like her mom's new boyfriend or her mom's new fiance. Because if there's obviously an issue going on where he isn't treating her right or he just doesn't care about her. So for me, as a mom, that would kind of be one of my first priorities, would be well, if my kid doesn't get along or doesn't like this guy, then there's a problem there. So I feel like that's definitely shows kind of her mom's character right off the bat.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the exact same thing. That's what stuck out to me the most. you are there to care for your child and only your child, and if someone else in your life is not getting along with your child, then you need to make it your priority to either make sure they do get along or just care for your child, because that's the most important thing in your life.
Yeah, like it's kind of always making it seem like Karissa was her second thought. Like she was more concerned about keeping her relationship going with Vernon and didn't really care what Carissa's feelings about him were. And obviously we don't know like any details about why she didn't like Vernon, but for whatever reason she didn't, and she didn't get along with him. And so that should have been something that Penny sort of sought to, make a situation better by breaking up with Vernon or trying to, I guess, patch things up with them. I don't know, but she didn't seem like she really made any attempt to really do that. Do you guys have any other thoughts?
So this like Mr. Big tactic, I actually heard about it before in other cases, and it's like super interesting. Like it's where the cops go undercover and pretend that they're part of this crime ring, and they have to try to win over the suspect by saying they can offer them protection as long as they are honest with them about everything they've done. And if they've ever committed a crime, they have to tell them all the details, and they pretend like they know stuff about the case and that the cops are coming after them, and they have to tell them everything. Anyway, it's like this kind of like entrapment, and I don't think it's even legal anymore in Canada. So it's like super interesting that it actually has led to quite a few convictions in Canada, but it's not legal anymore. But it's really interesting.
Yeah, when I was actually researching this case, I was like looking up like Mr. Big sting operations or whatever in Canada. It's literally like what I put into Google, but there was actually a lot in Canadian history that used the same exact, like pretty much the same story or like the same setup. And yeah, like you said, it is entrapment, right? Which is, I'm pretty sure that's illegal in most jurisdictions, but obviously it's not. But it is controversial because a lot of people think, it's tricking people, and it's not ethically, it's probably not, on the up and up, which would be accurate. But I guess if they're right in their suspicions and they're trying to go after these people they believe committed horrible crimes, I guess it is worth it. Or
yeah. But sometimes it makes it almost think like, well, the cops are onto you and they have all this evidence against you, whether it's true or not, and you're going to get convicted unless you tell me the truth, exactly what happened. And there's like a pretty famous case. It's like there's a Netflix thing about it, and they're saying, you have to tell me in detail what happened. So, and it feels like these people are offering them protection. So, kind of maybe some people would make things up just to fit into this group and be involved, and if they think the cops are going to come after them, even if they're innocent, then maybe they would concoct a story that would just offer them protection. So that's why it's so controversial and illegal now in Canada.
But I feel like if someone is totally innocent of something and they're saying we'll offer you protection, it's like, well, I don't have anything to be protected from, like if they're totally innocent. So it seems like, would they make up some fake story of something that, I don't know. I mean, but I did do a lot of, like when I was reading stuff, it did say it could lead to false confessions and stuff. So that has happened before. But
yeah, because I think sometimes they say they have all this evidence, and they can say stuff that's not true. Like they have this evidence against you, which looks pretty bad. So, if you don't tell me what happened, basically confess to me, then I can't protect you, and the cops will get you for this. So yeah.
They did an episode of Crime Beat was about this case, and they did say that a lot of, like, they interviewed Carissa's father, and he was saying that he was very suspicious from the get-go of Penny and also Vernon at the time. He said that just her demeanor and her behavior was not sitting right with him, and he didn't really go into a lot of detail about exactly what it was, but if you watch the press conferences, which are on this, the episode of Crime Beat, and it's like on YouTube, but when she's doing the press conference, obviously she's very emotional. She's breaking down. She can hardly get through any of her statements. It seemed like it looked like it was on the up and up, but then people kind of dissect the video later and they say like she's kind of shifty. She's not making eye contact with anyone. And they just said that her body language was kind of showing that she was not being upfront, which I don't know. To me, it seemed like, just as an outsider with no experience in like body language, like reading body language, but I don't know, it seemed like legit. If I just saw that on the TV, I would believe it.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that, like, when I was watching a documentary on this show, like, the first thing I noticed when it showed her in the press conference, that she didn't seem like a mother that was grieving. Like, yeah, she was crying, but I thought it was just a facade. Like, to me, it didn't seem real, like, from the get-go, like, when I was watching it. I thought she was just faking it the whole time, and I was very suspicious from her from the beginning when I was watching the documentary. Even though
but I think a lot of that is sort of in hindsight.
Yeah, it could be too. Yeah,
People are always going to dissect people's behavior, though. I feel like no matter what you do, and I say this all the time, and I will continue to say it. It's like, if you're acting super upset, it's like, oh my god, it's too dramatic, it's fake. If you don't have any emotion, it's like, well, you don't care at all. And there's no like middle ground. It's like, it's no matter what people do, you know, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So hearing people like tear these things apart like that, I just feel like they're just not legit, or there's not enough to stand on in most cases.
I want to know if like all these body language experts, like, have they ever gone through like losing a loved one or something, or like having someone in their family be murdered or something? Because it's like, how do you say how you would behave in that situation? I feel like no one is really expecting or knows how they'll behave. It's just kind of, you're just behaving how your emotions feel. I don't know. I just feel like there's nothing about the press conference when I watched it that's made it seem shady. Like, it just seemed like a mother who was very distraught over her missing child, but I don't know.
Yeah, when I was researching for another case, and there was like an expert on this, and I asked him, you know, how would you expect somebody to act in the situation? And they say, well, there's a spectrum, so it's like a huge spectrum. So it's like, but most people are outside that spectrum. So it's like, well, I don't know. It just doesn't. There's no clear like yes no answer. It's all up to interpretation.
We don't know how people are going to react to certain things. Like, I don't know how I'm going to react if something traumatic happened in my life. Like, I don't know what my demeanor is.
Yeah, it's not something that you really prepare for. You just kind of, when it happens, and then you just, you know, you're not really thinking about, oh, I shouldn't say this or I shouldn't say this. Like, you're just kind of saying what you...
To be honest, like, I'm not an expert. I have no idea how people will feel if they lose a loved one. Like, I don't know. You always see people saying, like, oh, I don't know. To me, she seemed to put on, like, a facade, but that's just me. But, I mean, I don't know how she would react in that situation.
Yeah, you think you know, but then, like, in a surprise situation like that, or something that's totally unexpected, then you don't know, even though you think you do.
I'm always interested to hear what those body language experts say or think, because I'm just interested in that sort of thing. But I think it's kind of, I don't know when I spend too much time trying to just dissect, like, every little movement she makes in the press conference, because, I mean, like I said, it seemed it was on the up and up to me. When I watched it, I was like, okay, this seems like it could, you know, be an appropriate reaction to your missing child. But one thing that Karissa's dad did say when they interviewed him for Crime Beat, he was saying that he was very suspicious right off the bat. One of the things was because he said Karissa would never just leave the car. Because, like, Penny's story was that they got into an argument, and then Penny went into Sobeys to buy some grocery, like a few things. It was actually juice and bacon. That's what they say in Crime Beat is what she bought. But so she went in. So basically, I think they just said that to say, like, she didn't go in and buy like an entire grocery order. It was like 2 things. But her story was that when she came out, like, Karissa stayed in the car. When she came out, Karissa was gone. But her dad said that would be very unlike Karissa. She's not just going to walk off, especially when it's like near zero out and she is only in a hoodie and Crocs. Like, that's not like her. And he said he knows her enough that she would not do that. So he said right off the bat, that was kind of sketchy. But when they did pull the surveillance video, like I said, of the Sobeys on that day, Penny did go into the Sobeys around the time that she says. So that was all legit, but the police were obviously very suspicious of her, enough to kind of start this covert operation with Vernon and Penny. But I'm very curious, because I said before, I couldn't find out why they were released from custody, because they were arrested and charged in February, but then they moved to Halifax in April. So obviously they were out of custody. So maybe they let them go because they didn't have anything concrete to hold them there. And then maybe they said, oh, we're going to do this like a covert thing to kind of get maybe a confession or get more information. So they let them go in the hopes that they could eventually get something to bring them back in, would be my guess. Right?
Well, could have they been out on bail?
Oh, yeah, maybe. Can you get, I guess, yeah. But didn't say that, though. I mean, I obviously, but like their bail, if you're charged with like that kind of a crime, your bail is going to be very, very hefty. And they were not, you know, a well-off family. So I didn't suspect that they would have the means to.
So I was just going to ask, why were they let go? Was there not enough evidence? Was there, it seems odd that they were just let out of jail and walk free type thing.
Like I said, I was reading the agreed statement of facts in the court case, and it does mention that they moved. It says on April 1st, 2008, Penny Boudreau and Vernon moved from their apartment in Bridgewater and relocated to an apartment in Halifax. So, but it doesn't say anything about why they were let go. But in any event, like I said, they were let go, and then this undercover investigation started because they had enough suspicion to warrant this undercover sting operation. So like I said, on May 3rd, 2008, the undercover officers convinced Macomber that they needed a female for the work that they were doing, and they asked him to approach Penny with this. And like I said, they were building rapport over a long period of time, so he did trust them enough, and he believed their cover story was that they were a crime syndicate that was gonna they were trying to bring him into it, and also Penny. So on June 11th of 2008, Penny met with an undercover officer who said that he could make her problem go away, but that she would need to tell him everything about what happened to Karissa so that he would know what work he needed to do in order to help her do this. And it was at this initial meeting with him, after he told her all of this, that she admits to killing Karissa on January 27th. According to her story that she tells him, she says they left for a drive on that day around 3 or 4 p.m. Penny says she went into Sobeys to buy those items, and then when she comes out, she goes to the trunk of her car to put the groceries in, and as she's doing this, she grabs a piece of beige twine, and then she like balls it up into her hand, puts it into her pocket, and then they proceed to drive to William Hebb Road, which was kind of a stretch of highway where the embankment was found, where her body was later found. When they got to this road, she tells Karissa to get out, and then Penny herself got out of the car. Then she says that she tackled Karissa to the ground, and Carissa's last words were, she said, "Mommy, don't." And Penny says it was then when she wrapped the twine around her neck and strangled her. And Penny even says that she used her knee to pin Karissa to the ground. Penny says that she had been planning this for weeks leading up to this. She says that it was Vernon who offered her an ultimatum, and he said that either Karissa goes or I go. And she says that she was so afraid of losing Vernon that she thought this was the only solution to that. It kind of goes back to what we said. She was putting her relationship with Vernon, obviously, before her own child, and she was so afraid, according to her, she was so afraid of losing him that she thought this was the only way, the only solution for her. And she does say that she knew that there was snow in the forecast coming up, so she knew that by doing it on that night, that when she disposed of the body, that the snow would cover her and then she wouldn't be found for a while. That was what she said. So, and the agreed statement of facts that I read goes into like horrific amounts of detail about exactly like what technique she used to strangle her and like the struggle, but I'm gonna kind of spare you all of those details unless you want me to go into that, but I assume you probably don't. No?
No, that's good.
Okay. Once Karissa was dead, then she placed her on the floor, the passenger side of her vehicle, drove a little bit back into Bridgewater, and she then dumped the body over the embankment on William Hebb Road, and she placed the beige twine into an empty Tim Hortons cup and threw it into the trash. And then she went and she threw the clothes into the swimming pool trash can that were later found by that resident. And it was then when she was disposing of the clothes that she realized that she only had one crock. So she put the one crock into the garbage and didn't realize that she had left the other one literally at the crime scene. And the most astonishing thing was during this confession that Penny gave to this undercover police officer, she actually gives a physical reenactment of the crime. And she's basically going through all of the motions and showing him exactly how she killed her. And he says that she had very little emotion as she was describing this. It's horrific to hear as he's describing like how she was telling him that she did this with almost no emotion, and it's terrible. But then after this was on June 11th that she gave this confession to him, and then on June 14th of 2008 she was arrested and she was charged with first-degree murder. And like I said, she did admit to him that she had been planning it for weeks in advance, or at least days or weeks in advance, but she was planning it, so it was premeditated. That led to the first-degree murder charge. She goes on to later explain that she said she would do anything for Vernon, and she goes into more detail saying she was scared to lose him. And he says that he never gave her an quote-unquote ultimatum, like she says. He just said that he had told Penny that her and Carissa's constant arguing had to stop, basically, by either going to like he probably meant like going into counseling, or maybe having her go live with her father for a little bit or something. Obviously, he never meant to go to the lengths that she did. And he was eventually, he wasn't a suspect anymore, and all of the charges against him were dropped. And it was, they came to the agreement that it was all Penny's doing, and she didn't really consult with Vernon at all. And it was actually going back to that altercation that they had in the apartment that the neighbors had overheard. That was when she had allegedly told him that she might have had something to do with Karissa's disappearance, and that's when he was screaming at her, saying he was going to leave her. He was throwing things and saying, "How could you do this? How could you do this?" So that seemed like it was all on the up and up with what he was saying, and so they felt confident clearing him of any charges. So this, of course, devastated the community of Bridgewater, and the documentary goes into a little bit about just how shocked the community was, because you don't really think of something like that happening in your town, but let alone like a small town, that things like that don't really happen. And so there would people be waiting outside the courthouse, like people in the community who would heckle her as she would be escorted from the police car to the courthouse. And it was, they show video of that when she's like driving, the police is driving off with her in the car, and they're shouting profanities and stuff at her. So obviously she was was the most hated woman in probably all of Nova Scotia at the time. So during her initial arrest, and when she's charged with first-degree murder, she doesn't really go into any details. She doesn't give any admission. But then when they do sit her down and they play her the audio tape of the confession that she gave to this undercover officer, that's when she realized that, obviously it was going to be used against her. It wasn't going to look good at all. And she eventually ended up pleading guilty to a lesser charge of second-degree murder as part of a plea bargain. And like I said, the undercover operation audio and video was the key evidence, and that was why she pled guilty. She knew there was no kind of no way she could make a defense that would be believable. So her defense thought by pleading guilty that she would get a lesser charge if it was second degree. But like I said earlier, she had admitted that she had been planning it for a while before she actually did it, which shows premeditation, which is kind of against the second degree murder charge. It wasn't sort of a heat of the moment thing. So, but anyway, she pleaded guilty to second degree, and she was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 20 years. During her incarceration, they got a little bit more information about Penny's childhood upbringing. She said that her mother had committed suicide when she was a young age, and so that really, gave her a lot of issues as she was an adolescent going into adulthood. She was later diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and borderline personality disorder while she was in prison. Do you guys have any thoughts so far?
Just crazy to think that all her boyfriend wanted was either for her to go back to her father's house, or just to get some help so they could just not fight all the time. But she took it so drastically that killing her daughter was the only option for her to stay with her husband. Seems totally bizarre to me. That's the first thing that comes to your mind when someone gives you an ultimatum like that. That doesn't make any, obviously there's other things going on in her mind for her to go straight to murder.
Yeah, and I'm wondering what's so great about this guy that would make her choose him over her daughter, and make her go to those lengths to get rid of her daughter so that she could stay with him. I know Bridgewater is a small place and Halifax is a small city, but I guarantee you can find somebody else that's not going to give you that ultimatum. There's other people out there for you. But other than that, I don't think it's too far-fetched to think that he did give her that ultimatum. He probably didn't think she'd go to this length. But I just can't imagine what goes through your head to be this is my best option, is to get rid of my daughter completely, rather than sending her to counseling or sending her to live with her father. Maybe that doesn't feel good, and you don't look like a good mother if you do that. But being a murderer is the worst thing. So I don't understand what goes through their head.
And he probably didn't spell it out. He probably just said it's either her or me. But he probably meant he didn't mean it like that. But she took it literally. He probably like, I don't think he explicitly said to her, like, you need to go into counseling or you need to have her go live with her father. Like, he didn't say those specific reasons, but he just said, like, it's her or me. And if you don't kind of sort this issue out with her, then I'm going to be gone. But she said that, or they surmised that she had such severe abandonment issues because her mother committed suicide when she was young, that these abandonment issues, you know, haunted her up into her adulthood. And when she was faced with the prospect of losing him, that she just couldn't bear the thought of being abandoned again. And she had obviously had other failed relationships in the past with Karissa's father, and she just couldn't handle the stress of that. So this is how she dealt with it, which is very messed up and it's so sad. And also, like, the fact that she goes into such gruesome detail about exactly like how Karissa struggled when she was strangling her, and her final words of "Mummy, don't." And she's like saying this to the undercover cop. And she's also saying that as she was like dragging Karissa out of the car to put her over the embankment, like she was like tugging on her clothes, and that made like her pants were like fell down to her knees, and then she left them like that because then she thought it would make everyone think that she was sexually assaulted, which would like lead them down that trail and away from her, I guess. And then obviously when they found the body, that was like kind of suspected right off the bat, but then they did like after the autopsy, they saw that wasn't what happened. But the fact that she's like staging it, and that's, I don't know, it's so horrific to hear her actually. And they never released like the audio footage or the video footage of this, of the police sting. Like they played it in court, but they never released it to the public because it was under the Privacy Act. That kind of thing never. But according to people who were there in court, listened to it, it was so horrible to hear her describe all this. Well, I think when they played it back in court, she was breaking down during like when she listened to it in court, but when she was actually giving the confession to the undercover cop, she was just saying it like so matter-of-factly, like just spitting out like, this is what happened, this is how it happened. And she wasn't, you know, a far cry from the, you know, emotional mess that she was in the press conference. Like she didn't really have any of that during this confession, or it doesn't appear that she did anyway from what the interviews say and stuff. So the fact that you could actually just so matter-of-factly be like, this is what happened and this is exactly how I killed her, and then I tried to stage it to make it seem like it was a sexual assault, like it's just something a monster would do.
Yeah, it really is horrific. And like, first off, if you have abandonment issues, maybe don't kill members of your family. And it's not like it was a jerk reaction, like she lost it for a second, like push her down the stairs, or like, I don't know, it was like a struggle. Like this would have taken a lot of effort, and she was super determined to kill her, obviously. Like I feel like if her daughter's fighting, like she could have stopped and been like, okay, like what the hell am I thinking? But she like physically fought with her. Like it's so disturbing to think of, and like just picture that. Yeah, like just ugh.
Yeah, and like I said, she pled guilty to second degree, which is kind of second degree murder is like when it's not planned out and it's not premeditated. But you know, clearly she took her on a drive, and then she went into Sobeys and then took the piece of twine and put it in her pocket after, and like purposely drove her out to the secluded area, and then like told her to get out of the car and tackled her. Like that's very planned. It's deliberately planned. And it's just like, I don't know, I do wonder though, like, because when she was dumping the clothes into that garbage can at the swimming pool, like that was when she realized that she only had the one crock. I wonder if she didn't leave the other crock by mistake at the crime scene, because that's what tied, and they didn't release any of that to the public, so it was only her that would have known that. But I wonder if she didn't leave that crock behind, that they probably wouldn't have even placed it or pieced it together that the crock that they found in the garbage can was tied to that. It was only because it was the same size and the same color. But I don't know, I just like, it's not a good piece of evidence to leave behind, and obviously she didn't know she did it.
Yeah, that is weird to think of. I don't know if anybody would have noticed it, or if anybody would have connected the two things together if the crock wasn't left at the scene. A mistake that she wished she didn't make.
But yeah, she had multiple chances to like turn back, like you were saying, like she had that twine, she put it in her pocket, like she could have just not, you know what I mean? She didn't have to commit from that moment. She could have turned back at any time. And I just can't get over like the physical fight she would have had to do with this 12-year-old daughter, super determined to kill her. Like it's just super.
Yeah, it's like she's depressing. And like doesn't matter what really age she is, but she's only 12. Like that's so young. And like I said, the agreed statement of facts goes into all the details about like the struggle, but spared everyone from that. But an article I read from 2018, so she was like convicted and she was sentenced to life in jail back in 2009, and she was given life without parole for 20 years. So 2029 would be when she'd be eligible for parole. But in 2018, she was granted day patrols. So she has 4 day patrols that she's allowed to use. And this was in July of 2018. So up until the end of the year, she was allowed to leave for the day. Obviously, escorted, like she couldn't go out by herself, but she was allowed. And it was in order for her to go to church. She was allowed to attend church 4 times up until the end of the year. So that was controversial as well, because obviously people were very upset about that, especially the people in Bridgewater.
Why? Like, I feel like Canada's too nice. It's like, oh, you've been in jail for so long, like, you know, you deserve to be out now. Like, I don't understand it.
And they said, I don't know if it was in the hearing for this like day patrol thing, but they said that she was considered a very low risk to reoffend. But still, like, it's such a heinous crime, and there's people in her family who say that they don't think that she has any remorse, and everything was crocodile tears, like from the press conference and everything that she displayed. And they say that, like, listening to that confession she gave and how matter of fact it was, that kind of just proves that she had no remorse, and she just kind of wanted to live a simpler life without her 12-year-old daughter, and wanted to live happily ever after with Vernon.
Did Karissa's father have any opinion on like her getting like day parole? Did he have any opinion? Like, did he have anything to say about that?
Yeah, in the episode of Crime Beat, he was pretty upset, but he also said that he understands like rehabilitation. So he said that if she could give him valid reasons why she believes that she's been rehabilitated, and give her a valid reason why he thinks that she should be allowed to be given parole, or day parole, that he would say, okay, like, I would agree with that. But he said, I don't think it's ever going to happen, because I don't think she actually feels any type of remorse or anything for it. So he said, if she were to like be able to, then maybe, but he feels pretty confident in saying that she doesn't have that ability, or at least he doesn't think she does.
Did Vernon stick around this whole time, or did he kind of like get out of there pretty early on?
Yeah, so once he was like cleared of the charges and everything, and he said like during the investigation that the reason when they first brought that undercover cop into jail when he was there to build a relationship with him, he was saying, yeah, he was staying with Penny during all this because he was afraid that she was going to turn it on him and say he was complicit if he were to leave, because obviously she had some emotional issues. But yes, once he was cleared and everything and she was put in jail, he left and never looked back. But he said that obviously this, just being associated with this case, has ruined his life, or a great portion of it, because, you know, when you Google his name and it's going to come up, this case, and even though he's been cleared of it and they don't think he had any part in it whatsoever, but it's still like he is tied to it.
Yeah, he won't be able to escape that, and that's like sad for him. And he probably, I don't know if he has like regrets about his actions or things he said to her to make her think that, or warning signs that he didn't see. I don't know if he thinks about any of that, but I mean, yeah, it's sad for him that it's going to be with him forever too.
Yeah, and even the cop that they interview in Crime Beat, he was kind of the main cop that they interviewed, and he said that he has PTSD from this case because it just stayed with him and he never really got over it. It's a really interesting interview, and it's on the Crime Beat, was the name of the show that this episode was on, so it's really worth watching, I think. But yeah, it's pretty awful, and I still can't believe that like she was just given the plea bargain of, if you plead guilty to second degree, then you'll get life without parole for 20 years instead of life without parole. So because she pled guilty to second degree, which didn't fit with any of the evidence, considering that she planned it, it's just crazy to think that you can just change what you plead regardless of what you said, and we're going to get a lighter sentence. And now it's like 20 years. That's 2029, which is still like 8 years away, but it's really not that long considering like she could be out in 8 years. And if they think she's a very low risk to reoffend, then she probably will get parole.
She probably will get out, and I feel like they don't have to give her a plea deal. Like, if she like confessed to planning it out, why would they offer that? Just so she wouldn't have a trial?
Well, I think it was probably her lawyer that said you need to plead guilty to second degree.
But
to avoid a trial, because if it went to trial, she probably would have just been convicted of first degree. But if she pled...
everybody that has first degree murder charges against them can't just be like, oh, I'm just gonna plead guilty to second degree just because I can. That's not always on the table, right?
But so, I guess I don't think so. But maybe.
And the prosecution doesn't have to agree to that either. I just find it interesting that they had a full confession where she said she planned it out and they didn't go with it.
Yeah, I guess, what did they do? They wanted to spare everyone the trial? I don't know why, though. If they have that evidence, they could just do the trial, pretty clear cut, then they could send her away and she wouldn't get any parole. Keep saying patrol. But then she wouldn't get any parole, so I don't know, it's weird that they just kind of gave in. And I don't know, the legal, I'm not a lawyer or anything, so I don't know the complex legal stuff, but it just seems, kind of weird that they're just like, oh yeah, we're gonna, forego this trial and just give you a lighter sentence because... Even though, it would be very easy to just give her the full life sentence.
I guess because there'd still be a chance that she could get off with nothing if they did go to trial. So I guess it's just she's going to go to jail for 20 years if she pleads guilty to this anyway. So I guess that's good enough. Easier, I guess. But
I mean, they had to feel fairly confident that they would be able to convict her with a jury. If they had that confession tape and they played it in trial, that was the whole reason. Because she said that she wasn't being upfront. She wasn't giving any... she wasn't giving a full confession when they arrested her. It was only when they played back the footage to her that she realized oh shit, can't really refute this. So I'm pretty sure a jury would have thought the same thing.
Right, and when they played it back to her, she agreed with everything, right? She didn't try and fight it. She didn't say, oh, she just made it up. She went along with it. So I don't know, it's super weird, and that's a clear cut confession as you can get. And they still didn't. Yeah,
that was that's the dream that most prosecutions would die to have, that clear cut confession. It's just weird. It's just weird how the legal system works, and there's these loopholes that just allow people to. And she did a horrible crime. She killed her 12-year-old daughter. I don't know.
I'm just curious to know why, how they can tell that somebody is at low risk to reoffend or somebody is a high risk to reoffend. What process they go through to make that decision. She could get out of jail in 9 years and go murder somebody else. How do they know? I
don't know. I mean, I'm sure they have professionals who weigh out all the criteria and determine whether someone's high risk or low risk, but she probably had no prior criminal record, and they probably assumed that this killing of Karissa was directly linked to her fear of abandonment with, I don't know, maybe she wouldn't be allowed to have kids. I don't know. Can you?
Yeah, but when she gets out of jail, nobody's gonna want to be around her, so she's gonna be abandoned anyways. She's not gonna. Do you know what I mean? Though, she's not gonna just pick up where she left off when she.
Well, she might move away, because as I said, this case probably outside of Nova Scotia, it's not super well known, so she could move across the country or to another country.
That's true.
And no one would even know who she is. Change her name, change her appearance.
I guess
probably easy to do. All right, so. Pretty crazy case, but I just wanted this one is from Nova Scotia, so it's I don't know, it just feels so much different when it's Nova Scotia, when you live there and you realize how small it is, and then this case that was so well known, just it hits different.
Yeah, it has a weird eerie feeling when you know how close to home it was, and we lived there at that time, so yeah, it's weird.
So that does it for this episode of Crime Family. We thank you so much for listening. If you like what you hear, you can follow us on Instagram at Crime Family Podcast. You can also follow us on Twitter at Crime Family Pod 1. You can make sure to leave us a review and a rating on your favorite podcast streaming app. You can also subscribe to us there so that you get notified as soon as we release a new episode. The music that you're hearing throughout is done by the awesome Tim Monis. You can follow him on Instagram at TIMMONIS. Just spell it out for you. Also, we do have a Facebook page now, so you can find us at Crime Family Podcast on Facebook. And also, we do have a email, so we're at crimefamilypodcast@gmail.com. You can send us your feedback or even a case suggestion if you have one, and we'll be very interested to read it and possibly do the case that you want us to cover. So, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Take care.